The palace lies in darkness. Oil lamps flicker against cool stone walls, their light spilling over silk cushions and quiet pools of gold and glass. The air is warm and still, carrying the faint scent of oils and incense that linger from the day. Outside, beyond an open window, the night over Alexandria stretches deep and blue. Far in the distance, Roman campfires glow like scattered embers along the horizon, a silent line of light that never quite goes out. In her private chamber, Cleopatra sits awake, the last pharaoh of Egypt, queen of the Nile, alone with her thoughts as the final hours of her reign drift, moment by moment, into history. What truly happened in this quiet room has never been completely clear. Ancient writers left us different versions of her final hours. Most were Romans, telling the story of a queen they had defeated, shaping her ending to fit their own triumph. Centuries later, others would add their own details and symbols: a hidden snake, a basket of figs, a secret draught of poison. Some modern researchers look back at those old accounts and quietly wonder how much of this is fact and how much is theater. Tonight, we don't pretend to have a final answer. Instead, we'll walk gently through one possible version of this night and then sit with the questions that still linger in the dark around it. This is the Nocturne History, where old stories and deep mysteries unfold in the stillness of night. Whether you're lying in bed or simply letting this keep you company in a quiet moment, you're welcome here. Before we go any further, take a moment for yourself. Adjust your pillow if you need to. Settle your head a little more comfortably. Let your shoulders soften into the mattress and pull your blanket up around you. Let your breathing slow in and out. There's nothing you have to do now, nowhere you have to be. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own gentle pace. This tale is meant for sleep. There will be no sudden sounds, no jolts. If your eyes grow heavy and you drift away before the end, that's exactly how it's meant to work. The story will keep going without you. Tonight, we'll stay close to Cleopatra through this final night. We'll feel old memories rise and fade. Her rise to power, the loves and alliances that shaped her world, the slow closing of the Roman net around her. We'll touch on the different possibilities of how her story ended and the uncertainty that history leaves behind. For now, let all other thoughts fall away. We return to that quiet chamber in Alexandria, to the soft light of the lamps, and to a queen sitting alone with the night, while the world outside prepares to change forever. The chamber is quiet. Lamp flames burn low in their bronze bowls, their light moving softly across stone walls and carved columns. Gold and glass catch the glow in small, patient flashes. A bracelet on a stand, the edge of a mirror, the painted eye of a distant statue watching in silence. The air is warm and still. It holds the faint sweetness of oils used earlier in the evening. Myrrh, lotus, a lingering trace of something floral that clings to the fabric and the cushions. Somewhere deep in the palace, a door closes with a dull, padded thud, and then the hush settles again, thick and unhurried. Cleopatra sits on a cushioned couch near the center of the room. Her back is straight, more from habit than effort now, her shoulders resting against the support behind her. Linen wraps her in pale folds, simple compared to the splendor she could demand, but nothing about her presence feels plain. A narrow band of gold circles her arm. Each small movement sends a line of lamplight sliding along it. She listens. Not for news, not anymore. Those messages have all arrived. What's left are the small sounds of a palace at the edge of sleep, the soft crackle of burning oil, the rustle of fabric when she shifts one leg, slowly, to ease a joint, the faint rhythm of footsteps somewhere down a corridor, more felt than heard. No scribe sat in this room to record these hours. What we imagine now is pieced together from fragments and from the quiet logic of how nights like this tend to feel. But it is close enough to let us sit beside her for a while. Beyond the walls, the city lies in its own uneasy rest. Streets that roared with voices by day are now only a muffled hum. Lamps are being snuffed, shutters drawn. The last of the merchants and sailors retreat behind wooden doors. Over all of it, the night sky hangs dark and wide, a few faint stars blinking through the haze. Far away on the edge of that darkness, Roman fires burn. They do not rush or surge, they simply glow, steady and distant, marking where another world has already taken root. Decisions have been made in those camps. Treaties drafted. Outcomes agreed upon in rooms she will never see. Whatever tomorrow brings is already moving toward her, slow and certain as the dawn. In here, for these last hours, the night still belongs to her. She lowers her gaze to a small clay cup on the low table beside her. Water sits untouched inside it, the surface smooth as glass. A tiny reflection of a lamp flame shivers there, its light trembling with the faintest movements of the air. She watches it for a long moment, following its small quiver as though it were a thought trying to decide whether to stay or slip away. This room has been many things to her. A place where orders were given, clear and sharp, where messengers knelt, breathless from long rides, waiting for her answer, where priests murmured blessings, where laughter once spilled late into the night, where tears fell quietly when there was no one left to see. Tonight, it feels larger and emptier than it has ever been, like a shell that has already heard the sea and is now only echoing the last of its sound. She draws a slow breath in, holds it gently, then lets it go. Her fingers move along the seam of the cushion at her side, tracing the stitching by touch alone. The fabric is cool under her hand. For a heartbeat, she presses her palm against the space beside her, the place where another body once rested, and then she lifts it again. Above her, the painted ceiling is faded with time. Stars and symbols overlook her, fragments of older stories layered above her own. She studies them, as if trying to fix them in memory. Somewhere in another age, Roman writers will draw their own pictures of this night in ink and words, reshaping her into whatever suits their tale: temptress, villain, tragic queen. The real woman in this chair is quieter than any of those masks and harder to see clearly through the fog of their accounts. A faint movement stirs at the doorway. A curtain shifts and a servant appears, head bowed, hands folded. Cleopatra turns her head slightly, meeting her with a calm, tired gaze. No command is spoken, none is needed. After a moment, the servant dips away again, leaving only the soft sigh of fabric falling back into place. The quiet thickens. Somewhere deeper in the palace, a guard clears his throat. The sound travels a little way, then dies against stone and distance. A dog barks once, far off in the lower courts, then thinks better of it and settles down. Cleopatra lets her head rest more fully against the cushion behind her and closes her eyes. For a few breaths, there is only the warmth of the air on her face, the familiar weight of her own body sinking gently into the couch, and the steady rise and fall of her chest. The palace feels as if it is holding its own breath with her, listening, waiting. She knows the shape of tomorrow. Not the details. Those belong to the men outside, to the scribes and the reports that will be sent to Rome. But the outline is clear enough. Egypt slipping out of her hands. Her name on the lips of strangers who will never see this room, never hear her voice, never meet her as she truly is. The sharper edge of fear has dulled. What remains is something quieter. A deep ache, and under it, a thin, steady line of resolve. The past begins to pull at her. It does not come all at once, but in small pieces at first. The feel of sun on her face as a child on the palace balcony, the rush of the Nile below, the sound of tutors' voices, the weight of a crown for the first time, the first moment she realized that people were watching her not as a girl, but as a ruler. She does not resist it. There is nowhere else for her mind to go, nowhere else her thoughts need to be. The world outside is already moving on a path she cannot change. What she can do, in this room, in this night, is decide how she will meet it, and remember how she came to stand here at all. The lamplight flickers, and with it, memory stirs. Let us follow her back now, through the years to where this story began. For a while, Cleopatra simply sits with the quiet. The lamps in her chamber burn low and steady. The city outside is wrapped in its own sleep, the sounds faint and distant. In this stillness, her thoughts begin to loosen and drift, not in a straight line, but like the slow turning of a river that bends back on itself. Memories rise. They come first as small fragments. Sunlight on the Nile, palace gardens in bloom, stone beneath bare feet. The sound of water and the weight of eyes watching her even when she was very young. No one wrote a careful record of her childhood for us. What survives are only hints. A few remarks about her learning, her wit, her unusual command of languages. The rest we must imagine gently, filling in the silence with scenes that match the world she was born into. She sees herself as a child again, standing on a palace balcony above the Nile. The stone beneath her bare feet is cool from the night. The morning air is still soft, not yet pressed down by the day's heat. Below, the river moves in its patient way, broad and calm, carrying boats that drift or strain against the current. The smells are water and distant earth, fish and damp wood, faint smoke from early cooking fires along the banks. She leans on the low railing, small hands resting on carved stone, watching the life below her begin to stir. Voices float up. A call between sailors, the thump of a pole against the side of a boat, the flap of linen catching the wind. From farther away comes the bleating of animals, the rustle of awakening fields. Somewhere behind her, inside the palace, doors open and shut, sandals whisper across polished floors. This was the ground she grew up on. The constant presence of the river, the echoing halls, the quiet knowledge that even as a child, she was being looked at not only as a daughter, but as something more, part of a line, part of a story older than she could yet understand. We see her again, a little older, in a shaded room with high, painted walls. A low table stands between her and an older tutor. Scrolls are unrolled, covered in careful lines of ink. Diagrams of stars, maps with lines that suggest roads and borders, columns of words in different scripts. The tutor speaks in Greek, then in Egyptian, then in the language of a distant neighbor. She answers in kind, repeating phrases until they feel natural on her tongue. Later writers, even those who disliked her, would admit this. She was quick to learn, and she listened. There is a seriousness in her young face as she takes in talk of kingdoms, of treaties, of older rulers who rose and fell. She is not being trained to be ornamental. She is being prepared, though no one yet knows exactly for what. Outside that room, the palace is restless. We glimpse corridors where courtiers walk in pairs, speaking in low voices. The words are not meant for children's ears, but some drift close enough. Inheritance, brothers, sisters, who will rule. The tones are careful, the kind adults use when they are circling subjects that weigh heavily on them. Cleopatra walks past as if unaware, the hem of her dress skimming the floor, a scroll tucked lightly in one hand. She does not turn her head toward the murmurs, but she hears them. In families like hers, rule is not simply handed down. It is contested, measured, debated, even if the debates are hidden behind carved doors and polite phrases. Long after these days, Roman writers will compress all of this, the lessons, the tension, the quiet watching, into a few smooth lines. She became queen. She made alliances. The long years of uncertainty and small adjustments are rarely described, but it is in these in-between stretches that something steady is being built inside her, a sense of herself and a stubborn refusal to disappear into the background. The memory shifts. She is no longer a child wandering gardens. She is a young woman whose place has already been threatened, who has felt the floor go out from under her once. At some point, our sources disagree exactly when and how she is pushed aside. Palace politics harden, the royal house fractures. She finds herself cut off from the center she assumed would always be hers. The details blur in later accounts. Each chooses its own way to tell the story depending on who they wish to blame. What matters tonight in retrospect is how it felt. The shock of exile, the taste of uncertainty, the realization that even a princess can be made to vanish from sight. Exile changes her. She learns what it is to live without the familiar echo of her footsteps in those halls, without the river below the same balcony, without the steady presence of servants who know her name. She learns who will still answer her messages and who will quietly turn away. She discovers that her worth, in the eyes of many, is tied not to who she is, but to whether she holds power. Years later, looking back from this last night, she understands how important that experience was. It taught her something that will guide her all the way to this hour, that being acted upon, being simply the object of other people's plans, is a role she cannot accept for long. She returns to Alexandria. Ships carry her back across the water. Deals have been made, support has been gathered. The account of exactly how this happened is scattered, told by voices who were not there. Some say she charmed, some say she threatened, some say she bargained. The truth is likely a tangled mixture, but the outcome is clear. She is back in the city of her birth, and this time she steps into its halls not as a girl hoping to belong, but as someone who understands how close she came to losing it all. We see her on that balcony once more. The same river glides below, but her gaze is different. The Nile is not just beautiful now, it is vital. It is the line that feeds her people, the route by which grain moves, the path along which both wealth and hunger can travel. She knows that whoever controls this river and the land around it holds something Rome will never stop watching. Inside, the palace feels altered too. She passes through chambers where servants bow, where advisors pause and study her face before they speak. Her siblings and kin move through the same spaces, carrying their own ambitions and anxieties. Every conversation contains more than what is said aloud. Every agreement feels conditional, depending on how the wider world shifts. Somewhere beyond the sea, Rome looms larger each year. At first, it is just a distant name, a source of envoys and demands, a place where decisions are made in crowded halls. But as time goes on, its presence grows. Messages from Roman officials begin to matter more. The balance of power in Egypt feels less like a local quarrel and more like one piece in a much larger game. It is in this climate that the name Caesar arrives. At first, it is only a word spoken with a mix of respect and concern. A man whose actions on other shores are reshaping the politics of the known world. Then, one day, he is not just a name, but a presence in the city. The accounts of their first meeting are theatrical. One story says she had herself wrapped in cloth and carried to him as a gift to bypass those who would block her access. Another insists the scene was less dramatic, more ordinary. We cannot know for certain which is true. What we can believe, without much doubt, is that she was determined to stand in front of him, and that, once she did, she made an impression. We find them in memory, in a quiet room, away from the noise. Outside, Alexandria breathes its restless life. Inside, Lamps cast circles of light on a table where a simple map lies spread. Small markers note positions of power, lines, sketch routes, and borders. The air is thick with the smell of oil and the muted warmth of many evenings spent in concentrated talk. Caesar speaks of her fractured dynasty, of rival siblings and their supporters, of what Rome can tolerate and what it will not. His tone is measured, confident, carrying the calm of someone who has shaped many outcomes with his decisions. Cleopatra listens. Then she answers in his own language. She points out which enemies are more show than substance, which allies are quiet but firm, where the city's mood truly lies. She offers him local understanding in exchange for his backing. There is no begging in her voice, only clarity. She is not simply asking to be saved. She is proposing that they hold this uncertain ground together, each gaining something they need. Later, Roman writers will frame this relationship however suits their purposes. Some will blame her for his choices, some will dismiss her as a distraction. None of them sat in this room, watching two skilled survivors measure each other. They preserved the fact of their alliance and their child, but not the full sense of two people who, for a brief span of time, saw in one another someone equally used to balancing on the edge of power. That span ends. His path pulls him away across the sea. In Egypt, Cleopatra continues to rule, but now with her eyes turned more often toward Rome. When news eventually reaches her that Caesar has been attacked and killed far from the Nile, she receives it as something both distant and personal at once, the end of a man who once sat at her table, and the turning of a page in a story whose next chapter she cannot yet see clearly. Time moves forward. Another Roman name walks into her life, Mark Antony. Where Caesar had been carefully contained, Antony is looser, more open, more given to grand gestures. The stories people love to tell about their first meeting are full of spectacle. A queen on a barge with purple sails, music on the river, perfumes swirling in the air. As with so many parts of her story, it is difficult now to separate exact truth from later embroidery. What matters more is the shape of what followed. A partnership that for a time fused their lives and fortunes. We see them in one of the quieter evenings within that larger tale. They sit in a room that opens onto a balcony above water. The air is warm, touched by a faint breeze. Inside, a few lamps give enough light to see each other's faces clearly without chasing away every shadow. Music from another part of the house reaches them as a softened murmur. Antony talks with the ease of someone who has seen too many battlefields to be easily shaken. He tells stories of long marches, of nights in rough camps, of men who have followed him through hardship. He makes light of his own discomforts, turning them into jokes. Cleopatra listens, the corners of her mouth lifting now and then, but her gaze is thoughtful. He is not just a source of humor and companionship, he is a vital part of the fragile balance keeping her kingdom afloat. She speaks of Egypt in return, of how the river rises and falls with the seasons, of how the success of a harvest can soothe or stir an entire population, of festivals in the city, of priests who read meanings in the stars, of the weight of tradition pressing on a ruler's shoulders. These are things Antony has not lived, and he listens curious, more attentive than his easy manner might suggest. Affection grows between them, but it is never only that. Their days become woven together, shared counsels, shared risks, shared responsibilities. For years, she is no longer navigating this world entirely alone. When messages come from Rome, they discuss them together. When problems arise on the borders, they consult. Their fates, once separate, become tightly braided. The writers who tell their story later will often stretch this bond toward drama or morality, a love that doomed an empire, a cautionary tale about desire and downfall. From within these rooms, though, it is more ordinary and more human than those grand shapes suggest. Two people who find understanding in one another, and who also happen to stand at the center of decisions that will affect thousands. But even the most tightly woven threads can fray. We feel a subtle shift in the memories now. The scenes grow less bright. The voices of allies grow more cautious. The news that reaches them becomes heavier. Battles do not go as planned. Support that once seemed firm begins to tremble. Armies loyal to Antony suffer losses they cannot easily repair. Rome, under Octavian, grows less patient with their separate power. In Egypt, Cleopatra sees the pattern forming. The world beyond her borders is closing in, and the room in which she can maneuver grows smaller. One memory stands out among these later days. She waits in a high chamber, the air thick with the heat of afternoon. Outside, the city carries on. Markets, workshops, quiet conversations in shaded courtyards, but in this room, time feels held, stretched. She is waiting for news of a battle fought far away, a battle that will decide whether Antony's strength still balances Rome's, or whether everything will tilt sharply against them. A messenger is brought in, dusty and tired. The words he speaks are simple, but their meaning is vast. The victory they needed did not come. The tide has turned, and it is not turning in their favor. The exact phrasing he uses is lost to us. The ancient summaries condense entire conflicts into a few spare lines. What she remembers on this last night is less the wording and more the feeling that settles in her chest. A deep, quiet knowing that from this point on, she will mostly be reacting to events she did not choose. In the seasons that follow, things fall away. Antony's power erodes. His confidence, once so broad, grows thin and strained. Their shared plans narrow down to desperate hopes. Rome speaks now not of partnership, but of submission. Rumors reach her about how Octavian treats those he defeats. The parades, the public displays, the way conquered rulers are marched through the streets in chains for the crowd to look at. For someone who has spent her entire life learning how to carry herself as a queen, the thought of being turned into a spectacle is worse than death. She has known exile before, known what it is to be pushed aside, but that was disappearance. This would be a display. Not only losing power, but having her image, her body, her story used as a prop in someone else's triumph. She files that knowledge away. She continues to act, to negotiate where she can, to protect what remains. Yet somewhere beneath every decision lies a fixed line she will not cross. She will not walk in chains in a Roman parade. She would rather choose her own ending than live as a trophy in a foreign city. Antony's path reaches its own tragic turn. He dies before she does, in circumstances shaped by confusion and defeat. Once again, the writers who come after her will argue over the details, who sent which message, who misunderstood, who decided what, but none of them can fully capture what it felt like for her to stand, once more, in a world that has suddenly grown emptier. The man whose presence filled her halls with noise and warmth is gone. The alliance that seemed, for a time, strong enough to hold back Rome is broken. What remains around her is the fading echo of shared years and the undeniable fact that she is now facing the future alone. The memories pause. The rush of earlier days, of gardens and councils and river journeys, slows. In the chamber on this final night, Cleopatra draws a breath and lets it out. The weight of everything that has led her here settles gently over her shoulders. The child who watched the Nile, the young woman exiled and returned, the ruler who sat across from Caesar, the partner who walked beside Antony, the queen who has seen fortunes rise and fall more than once. Outside, the night in Alexandria deepens. Inside, she sits at the end of the long path of her own life, knowing that the story others will tell about her is not entirely in her hands, but still holding on to one last choice, that is, how this night and her part in it will end. The chamber feels smaller now. The night outside has grown deeper. The sounds of Alexandria are no more than a distant murmur, like the sea heard through thick walls. The lamps have burned down, their flames narrower, their light softer and more golden. Shadows gather in the high corners, and the air is warm and heavy with the faint sweetness of old incense and oil. Cleopatra sits very still. Her back rests against the cushions, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The long drift through her own past has left a quiet ache behind her ribs, a sense of distance between the girl on the balcony, the woman at Caesar's table, the queen beside Antony, and the person she is at this exact moment, alone in a room that has seen almost every phase of her life. For a few breaths, she lets herself simply exist. No plans, no arguments, no careful weighing of options. Just the feel of the fabric beneath her hands, the warmth of the air on her face, the soft, steady pull of her lungs taking in and releasing each breath. Out beyond the palace walls, decisions have already been made in her name. Rome considers Egypt no longer an equal, but a prize. The armies that once stood between her and that reality have melted away. The man who once shared her burdens is gone. The letters that arrive now are not invitations to negotiate, but declarations, cloaked in politeness, of how things will be. She cannot change those facts. What remains within her power, here in this chamber, is smaller but sharper. How she will meet what comes next. Her thoughts turn gently toward her children. They are not in this room with her. In her mind's eye, she sees them as they have been at different ages, small hands reaching toward her, faces creased in laughter in a garden, serious eyes watching her at council, copying her posture, heads bowed in prayer in the temple. She remembers the weight of each of them as babies, the warmth of their bodies when they fell asleep against her. Somewhere, perhaps not far from this room, they are sleeping now. She imagines them curled on their mats, unaware of how close they are to the edge of an entirely different life. Rome will not ignore them. Children of Cleopatra and of Antony, children of mixed lineages and blended claims, are too valuable, too dangerous to be left alone. They may be taken to Rome, raised as living symbols, folded into the vast machinery of another power. She cannot keep them from becoming part of that world. What she hopes, what she breathes out now as a quiet, wordless wish, is that they may be spared the worst of it, that they will be treated as useful but not humiliated, that they will find in that distant city some small spaces of safety in which to grow. She has no control over that now. The best she can do is meet her own end in a way that does not make their position worse. Her mind edges toward the image that has haunted her more than any other. It is not death that frightens her. She has lived too long with risk for that. It is the picture, painted by rumor and memory, of conquered rulers in Roman chains, dragged through streets between jeering crowds, paraded before the people as trophies of the state. She can almost see it if she lets herself. The roar of many voices compressed between high walls, the glare of foreign sunlight, the feel of rough metal biting into her wrists, of steps forced into awkward rhythm by the pressure of guards on either side. Her name, shouted by strangers, no longer as queen or pharaoh, but as the punchline of a performance designed to magnify someone else's glory. She does not dwell on this long. The thought lands like a stone in her chest and then quiets into something simple and absolute. She will not be seen that way. Not after a lifetime spent learning how to carry herself with a certain kind of dignity, even in the worst of circumstances. Not after surviving exile and return, wars and alliances, victories and losses. She would rather step out of the story altogether than let it end on those terms. No one can tell us exactly how she reaches this decision on this night. There is no witness in the room carefully writing down her thoughts. Later, men far away will debate whether she acted out of pride, despair, calculation, or love for her children. They will shape her choice into whatever form suits their own philosophies. What we can feel, sitting quietly beside her now, is that the choice matches the shape of the life she has lived. She has always pushed back, in whatever way she could, against being turned into an object in other people's plans. Now, when the circle of her control has shrunk to almost nothing, she finds the last point of resistance, the manner of her ending. She rises slowly from the couch. Her muscles complain at first. The night has grown long. She stands still for a moment, letting her body adjust, the cool of the floor seeping through the woven mat beneath her feet. The room looks different from this angle, as if every object has shifted slightly. She moves toward a low chest and opens it with steady hands. Inside lie garments folded with care. Fine linen, rich colors, the kind of clothing she once wore for ceremonies, for appearances before crowds and envoys, for days when every glance was a message. She lifts out a robe, one that falls in long, clean lines, and lays it across the bed. If there is to be an end, she will meet it dressed as a queen, not as a prisoner. She takes time with this. The simple acts of undressing and dressing become a kind of quiet ritual. The familiar rustle of fabric, the soft snap of a belt, the slide of cloth over skin, they anchor her in her own body, remind her of the self she has inhabited through all the changes around her. She straightens the folds of the robe, smooths out a crease that no one else would notice. She lifts a diadem from its stand. The metal is cool against her fingers. She has worn it for formal appearances, for audiences, for times when she needed its visible symbol of authority. Now she settles it on her head with slow, careful hands. There is no crowd to witness this, no envoy to be impressed. It is for herself, and perhaps for the quiet eyes of the gods, or for whatever part of her hopes that someone, someday, will remember her as more than a captured spoil. She pauses before the small image of Isis on the wall. The candle burning in front of the carved figure throws a flickering light upward, catching the lines of the goddess's face. Cleopatra stands very still, the robe falling in straight lines from her shoulders, the diadem glinting faintly. She does not recite a long, formal prayer. Instead, she lets her thoughts reach outward in a simple, wordless offering. Gratitude for the strength that has carried her this far, a plea for protection over her children, a request for courage in what comes next. If she speaks at all, her words are probably few. Names, perhaps, or a short invocation. Whatever she says dissolves into the warm air and is swallowed by the quiet of the chamber. Somewhere beyond the door, she calls for the attendants she trusts most. They come quietly, faces drawn with worry they do not fully voice. These women have seen more than most. The private moods behind the public mask, the tears and laughter that never reach the official records. They have helped her dress for ceremonies, held her hand in moments of grief, sat with her through long, sleepless nights. In low voices, she gives them what instructions she can, what to do with certain personal items, how to ensure small tokens reach her children if there is any chance at all. Perhaps she asks them to see to some final offerings at a temple, or to speak her name in certain places if they survive what is coming. The words do not have to be many to carry weight. They understand, even if she does not spell everything out. They see the robe, the diadem, the calmness in her eyes. They have served in this palace long enough to know the shape of a decision when it settles over a person. Their own faces reflect sorrow and fear, but also a kind of firm loyalty. Some of them have already resolved not to leave her, no matter what she plans. Time moves gently. The room grows quieter again. Somewhere in the palace, a guard shifts his stance. A distant door closes. The world beyond this chamber continues its slow preparation for a dawn that will bring Romans more firmly through these streets. In here, Cleopatra sits once more on the couch, now dressed in the finery of her rank, the last traces of preparation settling around her like another layer of fabric. On a low table nearby, servants place a small basket. From where we sit in the room, we see only the rounded shapes of fruit inside, figs, plump and familiar, their skins dull in the dim light. One story will later say that hidden among them is an asp, coiled and quiet, its presence revealed only when the moment is right. Another will suggest that the basket is a simple cover for a small container of poison prepared in advance. Still others will whisper that Rome itself arranged the entire scene and then let poets and playwrights gild it. No one in this chamber is taking notes to settle the question for us. What we can say, softly, is that the means of her end are now within reach. Whether it is fang or tincture or some combination we can no longer trace, it is a path that leads away from parades and chains and toward a different kind of silence. She regards the basket for a moment. Perhaps she touches one of the figs with her fingertips, feeling the give of its skin, remembering other evenings when such fruit was just a sweet, ordinary pleasure. Tonight, it carries another meaning altogether. Her attendants remain close. Two of them especially keep to her side, their faces set with the steady determination of those who have chosen to follow their mistress wherever she goes. If fear moves in them, it is quiet, held beneath the surface of practiced composure. They adjust her cushions, straighten a fold of her robe, perform small, unnecessary tasks in a way that says more than any words might. Cleopatra takes a slow breath. The next steps are simple, but they carry the weight of everything that has come before. She reaches for what has been prepared, whatever form it truly takes. There may be a slight tremor in her fingers, or she may be as steady as she appears. No one can tell us with certainty. Whatever passes her lips or presses against her skin does its work quietly. There is no sudden drama, no spectacle, only a spreading sensation, perhaps a coolness, perhaps a warmth, that begins at one small point and moves outward, winding gently through her body. Her attendants watch her face closely. They stay near enough to touch her if she needs it, but far enough not to jar her from whatever thoughts she has chosen as companions in these last minutes. If tears blur their vision, they blink them back to clear, wanting to see and remember her clearly. Cleopatra reclines on the couch. She adjusts the cushions under her head, lies back so that her spine rests fully against the support, her legs stretched out along the length of the seat. One hand lies on her abdomen, the other along her side. The lamplight touches the line of her cheek, the curve of the diadem, the folds of her robe. Her breathing slows. The air moves in and out of her lungs with less effort. Each breath seems a little longer than the one before, a little softer. There is no panic here, only a gradual loosening like fingers uncurled from a long-held weight. If there is pain, it is not sharp. It comes, if at all, as a heaviness, a drowsiness, a sense of the body becoming distant, less insistent. Her thoughts may wander briefly, to her children, to the river, to the ceiling above her painted with stars. She may remember her younger self on that balcony, the smell of water at dawn, the first sense that the world expected something from her. The edges of the room blur. The lamps seem to glow more faintly. The exact line where wall meets floor softens. The faces of her attendants become shapes of devotion and sorrow. Sound recedes. The tiny crackle of oil, the soft rustle of fabric, as if someone were gently closing a door between her and the world. Her chest rises, falls, rises, falls. Then the rhythm simply does not come back. Her features smooth into stillness. The diadem rests where she placed it. The robe falls in clean folds. The hand on her abdomen lies quiet. To someone stepping into the room for the first time, it might look, for a moment, as if she has simply drifted into an unusually deep sleep. Her attendants know better. One reaches, very gently, to touch her hand, feeling the warmth fading from the skin. Another bows her head, shoulders shaking, once before she masters herself again. They are alone with her for a short time, in this room that has now seen the beginning and the end of her story. Outside, the sky toward the edge of the city is beginning, very faintly, to pale. Somewhere, Roman soldiers are finishing another night's watch, unaware yet of what has just happened in the heart of the palace. The city stirs, slow and oblivious, on the brink of a morning that will find its queen gone and its future already claimed. In this chamber, though, everything is still. The air holds the last warmth of her presence. The lamps burn low. The small basket on the table sits quietly, its contents no longer needed. The image of Isis on the wall looks on with unchanging eyes. In time, others will enter. They will find her lying as she placed herself, dressed in royal garments, adorned with the symbols of her rank, her face composed. The room will hold its quiet for a moment longer before the world beyond begins to make its claims. Later, those with access to pen and parchment will begin to decide how to tell this story. They will highlight certain details, ignore others, add color where none was witnessed. Some will say the asp was real, some will insist it never was. Some will emphasize her courage, some will call it cowardice. The truth of this night will become, piece by piece, a puzzle of incomplete accounts and carefully chosen words. For now, in the quiet of the chamber, none of that exists yet. There is only a woman who once ruled a kingdom, lying in the stillness she chose, and a handful of loyal witnesses who will carry the memory of this moment in their hearts, even as the world beyond the palace walls begins, slowly, to move on. Beyond this room, time begins to move again. Her attendants will not stay here forever. They will be led away. The body will be prepared. Word will travel through the palace, then out into the city, then along the roads that lead toward Rome. And somewhere along that path, the night we have just walked through begins to change into a story. What do we truly know about this ending? We know that after Octavian's victory, Cleopatra was found dead in her chambers in Alexandria. We know that two of her closest attendants died with her. We know that she never walked in chains in a Roman triumph, never took that long, humiliating journey as a living trophy. When Octavian entered the city, he found a queen who had already stepped out of his reach. Around that bare frame, the details begin to blur. Most of the old accounts, even when they disagree on specifics, keep one simple idea at their center, that Cleopatra chose to die rather than endure public humiliation in Rome. The exact words change from source to source, but the shape is the same. A proud ruler, facing defeat, takes control of the one thing still under her command. It fits her life. The girl who would not disappear quietly into exile. The queen who sat eye to eye with Caesar and Antony. The woman who refused to see herself as a prop in other people's plans. This same person, on her last night, chooses an ending that denies her conqueror his grand display. How she did it, though, is where the mystery thickens. The most famous version is the one with the snake, a basket of figs, a hidden ass pea, a quick, secret bite. It has the simplicity storytellers love, a queen, a symbol of Egypt, and death gliding in on silent scales. It is dramatic, memorable, easy to paint and carve and retell. But when we look closely at that image, questions appear. A single snake, some have wondered, might not account for all three deaths. The kind of asp people imagine is difficult to hide or control. These questions have led some to suggest there were multiple snakes. Others have concluded the snake was never there at all. Another possibility whispers through the old lines. Perhaps it was not an animal at all, but a measured poison, prepared in advance. A draught stirred into wine, a paste laid carefully onto the skin, entering the body through a small, deliberate wound. A method that leaves few marks, that works slowly and quietly enough not to cause alarm outside the chamber until it is too late. And then there is the shadow of another idea. That Rome itself, or those acting in Octavian's interest, allowed or even arranged her death, then let the story harden into something more convenient. A queen who kills herself can be presented as proud but defeated. A queen executed outright might provoke more sympathy than they wished. If she was going to die either way, it would have suited her conqueror to let that be framed as her own choice. None of these versions can be proved beyond doubt. If we could stand in that chamber now, we would find only stone and silence. The lamps have long since gone dark. The air no longer holds any trace of incense or warmth. What remains are the stories people carried away, each one shaped by the teller's purpose. The people who truly knew what was placed on that table, what touched her skin, what passed her lips, are long gone. The accounts we have were written years or decades later, often by men far from Egypt, repeating what they had heard or what fitted the message they wanted to send. Some were closer to Rome and its politics. Some were more interested in moral lessons than in precise description. Some were simply telling the story the way their audience expected to hear it, choosing the details that felt most satisfying. The truth is likely less tidy than any of these neat pictures. It may have involved poison prepared earlier. It may have involved a snake or not. Romans may have looked the other way, or even quietly encouraged an outcome that spared them the difficulty of dealing with a living, defiant queen. Or perhaps everything happened exactly as one of the old stories says, and the uncertainty lives only in our distance from it. We stand now in that distance. Looking back across more than 2,000 years, we can make careful guesses, weigh which details appear most often, notice where accounts conflict. We can say that her death was almost certainly intentional, that it aligned with a clear and powerful motive, to avoid being displayed as a captive. Beyond that, the night remains veiled. There is a kind of stillness in leaving it that way. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Some remain as quiet rooms just beyond the reach of our lamplight, filled with shapes we can half see and half imagine. Cleopatra's final moments belong to that space. The closer we walk to the edge, the more we realize there will always be parts we cannot bring fully into focus. What we are left with is less a photograph than a shadow. A queen in a softly lit chamber, dressed in the clothes she chose, surrounded by the people she trusted, making a final decision in a world that had taken away almost every other option. In the next breath, we step back even further, away from the specifics of snakes and poisons and baskets, away from the cramped room in Alexandria, out into the long stretch of time that followed, where her image traveled through empires and ages, changing shape again and again in the minds of those who spoke her name. Let the questions rest here, unanswered. Some mysteries are meant to remain in shadow, gentle companions for the quiet hours of night. Her body was laid to rest. Rome took Egypt. New rulers came and went. The palace where she lived was changed, then ruined, then folded into the layers of a city that kept growing over it. Stone fell, names shifted, languages changed, but Cleopatra did not vanish. She moved into stories. For the Romans who had defeated her, she became a convenient shape, the dangerous foreign queen, the enchanting woman who lured their great men away from their duties. In their speeches and writings, it was easier to blame her than to admit that the cracks in their own world had come from within. So they painted her as a symbol, fascinating, powerful, and always, somehow, at fault. Centuries passed. Old scrolls crumbled, new copies were made. Each time, small changes crept in, phrases softened, details sharpened, stories streamlined into versions that were easier to remember. Playwrights and poets in distant lands took her up as a character. Some imagined her as a tragic lover. Others turned her into a cautionary tale or a glittering fantasy. The woman who once sat by a lamp in Alexandria became, little by little, more mask than person. Paintings gave her features that matched the fashions of the painter's own time rather than the face she actually had. Plays gave her speeches no one ever heard her speak. Novels filled her days with conversations and intrigues that never took place. Yet still, behind all those invented details, something recognizable remained. A ruler in a difficult position, trying to hold her ground as the world shifted under her feet. Even the way people judged her changed with each era. Some admired her intelligence and courage, her ability to speak many languages, her refusal to disappear quietly. Others focused only on the men she loved, as if her story could be reduced to theirs. Some saw in her a warning, others saw a mirror. Each age remade her in its own image, finding in her story whatever it most wanted to see. And still, somewhere beneath all of that, there is the quiet room we have just visited together. Not the grand legend, not the painted queen in a golden frame, but the human being. A woman who had known love and loss, success and failure, fear and resolve. A mother thinking of her children, a ruler thinking of her people. A person at the end of a long and difficult road, choosing the one thing that was still truly hers to choose. History often turns people into symbols. It makes them larger than life, then flattens them again into a few simple lines. Dates, titles, victories, defeats. But if we pause, if we sit with their stories slowly, as we have tonight, we can sometimes feel the softer outline of the person behind the symbol. Their doubts, their hopes, the small ordinary moments that never made it into the official records. Cleopatra has been many things to many people over the centuries. To some, a warning. To others, an icon. To us tonight, she has been a quiet presence in a dimly lit room, her life unfolding in memories and ending in chosen stillness. She is no longer a distant, abstract figure. She has become closer, more human, more real. And now, gently, we set her story down. The lamps in her chamber can grow dim in our minds. The sound of the Nile can fade to a soft, distant murmur. The voices of Rome, with all their judgments and arguments, can slip back into the background where they belong. Bring your attention for a moment back to where you are. Feel the surface beneath you. The mattress, the pillow, the weight of your blanket resting over you. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders sink just a little deeper into whatever is supporting you. You have walked through a long life tonight. From bright balconies above the Nile to quiet, heavy hours at the end of a reign. From crowded halls to a single room with a few steady lamps. You do not need to hold all those images tightly now. You can let them drift, like boats on a dark river, slowly moving away into the night. If your eyes are still open, you can let them close or soften your gaze. If your thoughts wander back to Cleopatra, her choices, her mysteries, that's all right. Let them pass through, like clouds crossing a sky. You don't need to solve anything. You don't need to decide exactly what happened in that chamber. The questions can be allowed to remain questions. All you have to do now is breathe, in and out, slowly, gently. The past is very far away. The stories are finished for tonight. The world outside your room can wait. For these next moments, there is only your breath, your body, and the quiet that gathers around you. If sleep comes, let it come. Let it wrap around you like the softest night in Alexandria, warm and still. Let your thoughts grow lighter, your body heavier, as you drift away from waking and into rest, carrying with you only the sense of having visited another time, another life, and returned safely home. And if you are not yet asleep, that is all right too. You can stay here listening to the silence after the story, feeling your breathing slow, your muscles loosen, your mind grow calmer. Whenever sleep is ready to find you, it will. For now, the night is yours.